We're now going to move on to pivot tables, which I think is probably one of the most useful tools that you can do with Excel. Pivot tables are also called cross tabulations or cross tabs, where we're putting stuff in rows and then tabulating across the columns, right? All right, so we're going to use the sales data worksheet that we've seen before in some previous videos. It looks like I have mine saved as a table from when we were doing the table stuff. Hopefully yours is still like this. If not, it shouldn't be too hard for you to get to this point. And it's not necessary that you necessarily have it as a table anyway, but we'll see how it goes, right? So let's try, just to remind ourselves, I'm going to go to the bottom here. I did have a total row. Okay, don't think that'll mess us up. Let's find out. So to do a pivot table, we go to Insert, and then on the far left is Pivot Table right there, right? Pivot Table, and notice it thinks it's Table 2 because I had created a table. When we created that table, it named it for us. If you don't have the name of it, right, then you can select it, but that is what I want. Notice it does not include the total row, which is good. I'm going to do it in a new worksheet just so I don't mess up anything here. Click OK. And you should get the pivot table tools show up here where we're under Analyze. And then over here we get the pivot table fields, all the different columns basically. And if none of this stuff over here is showing up, then you need, underneath Show, you can do field list, buttons, headers. So if I do this, right, it goes away. The field list goes away, right? Do that, it comes back. The buttons and the field headers and all that stuff, right? So I usually go ahead and have everything shown just because it's easier. When you hand this off to somebody, you might not show it just so that it doesn't confuse them too much, but that's up to you. All right, so the first thing we want to do is answer a question. Let's see if we can answer the question of which items were sold most frequently across each region. So this is why it's called a cross tabulation, because we're doing it like a two-way, right? We're looking at things across two different dimensions. So I want to know which items were sold across which region and in what quantities. Quantities is, we can interpret that several different ways, so we might try to look at that as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put item, I'll come over here to the pivot table fields, take item, drag it down to rows. Notice over here, I'm going to zoom in so it's maybe a little easier to see. Our row labels, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different items that we're selling. Now, if I had a bunch of items, this may not be the best thing to do, but we knew we didn't have that many items that we were selling. So then the next thing I want to do is I said I want to know how these compare across region. So I'm going to take region and I'm going to throw it into columns. So now we see we have central, east, and west. And by default, it puts a grand total over here. It also puts a grand total at the bottom. Okay. So now the last thing we need to do is to figure out what we want to fill in this table with. Right? So I said how many, right? So we could do total sales. Let's do total sales first. Right? Notice that by default, when I do that, it's doing the sum of the total sales. Also, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this little drop down and do value field settings. And so here is where I can change different things. Right now, by default, it's a sum. I could do count, I could do average, I could do min, max, product, all this stuff, right? I think for now, let's keep it as a sum. And then number format, I want this to be currency, right? Because I'm dealing with dollars here. So I'm going to click OK, click OK, and now we have nice dollars shown for us. Right? Now, if we're interested in which region had the most sales across all, we can see quite easily here that it looks like Central, almost $14,000. right, out of the 24,000. So it's the grand majority. We also see that binders overall appear to be the biggest. Now, if this was not, notice this put this in alphabetical order. If it was not like that, you could sort it that way. All right, so that's the sum of the total sales. What if we wanted to see the profit? Because I had the total profit there too. Well, we could do this one of several ways, right? We can double click on over here, take profit and throw it down into values, right? And then I want to do the number format again for the value settings to be currency. Click OK. Click OK. It adds another column for each region. If I want to get rid of the total sales, the revenue basically, I can do that and I can see profits. That doesn't change much. Maybe the pen set may have changed a little bit. We'd have to go back and look at that. Let's do that actually. Hit Control Z, two more times. No, the pen set is also higher here. Right? So that's two different looks at it, looking at the items versus the regions. Where here we have the total sales and revenue in dollars, right? Then we added the profit and took out the sales and looked at just the profit in dollars. So depending on what our goal was, we might want to look at one of those over the other, or we might want to put them together. So that's our first pivot table using this data. We'll come back and do a couple more in just a few minutes.